And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, my friends, to the show. Never really gets going because we just sort of faff about for a bit. It's your favorite podcast. It's Doctors.
But not doctors. I am Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
And this week we are going to do this in two very different parts. So in the first part, we're going to be talking about things that have happened this week. And then very interestingly, we're going to take the second part. We're going to take a little trip. And we're not going to tell you where until we actually get to the break. So it's been an interesting week. I have been neck deep in all sorts of stuff again, but I have been able to notice that, the world is still spinning out of control at the very top line of every like major industrialized country.
I mean, the thing is, this really raises some interesting philosophical questions, Chris, because the thing is, news is what happens that is new, right?
That's correct.
But if news keeps happening, then it's not news that news is happening. And so the news itself ceases to be news.
Well, I think the news exists in its own like universe and of each individual instance of news, because we have so much news happening. And frankly, it's always happening. There's always something going on that's interesting around the world. Is there something that's interesting to you or to me that's totally different? So I
suppose that's it. Yeah.
There have been wars, there's I think a couple countries in Africa currently are in the middle of some pretty brutal wars. We hear very little about that in the news. It does appear in the BBC, but we hear very little about it in the news. It doesn't make its way into the conversation. I am no better than anyone else on this. I am aware of the fact that shit is going very poorly in South Sudan, as well as in the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where I understand. Right. I think it's Paul Kagame in. That's Rwanda. No, Paul Kagame is
Paul Kagame is Rwanda.
Is the eternal president of Rwanda.
That's right. Yes, he is. He is, in fact. And it's been Rwanda then that's been sending in troops basically into the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they have not been behaving with the gentlest of touches, it would seem.
Absolutely not. No, that's what's messed up is, I mean, obviously these regions have had decades of turmoil since and before colonialism, and usually the cause of these the root cause of these conflicts are colonialism. But it's so there are things like that happening. But of course, you get a lot less of that in the news here in London, and a lot more of the king going to Canada to open.
Oh, that was big. That was there was multiple stories about people talking about the king giving a speech in Canada. And this is the first time in like how long, Chris?
Since 1977. That was when Queen Elizabeth II went to Canada to open the Canadian Parliament again. So what's that? This is since the 70s. So
that is 48 years.
Nearly 50 years. Yeah, 48 years. Yeah. And this wasn't just some accidental trip. This wasn't just something that, the king or the monarch of the United Kingdom rushing
I'm bored. I could use a trip. What country will have me?
Well, it's not even what country will have me, right? So a disclaimer, I work in Parliament, work for the S&P and the Whip's office, so on and so forth. So what the king did is that he went over to Canada to open Parliament. So Mark Carney and his Liberal Party have just won an election there. And they, I wouldn't say it was a body slam to all the parties, but they did beat the hell out of the Conservative Party, who was led by, I don't know his name, Conservative Trump. He lost so bad, he lost his own seat. That's right. That's right. And he lost his own seat, which is a big deal.
Yeah, that's not normal, right? Because normally in a parliamentary system, if you're going to have a candidate that you want to be prime minister, you want them to be coming from a really safe seat, because it is incredibly embarrassing.
Just I would think. Reason.
Yeah, exactly. Right. For God's sakes.
Yeah. In the UK, you don't have to be from the place where you're standing to represent. So people get parachuted into these places all the time. I don't know the deal in Canada, but what's really interesting is that obviously, the MAGA president Trump has been talking about since before the election absorbing or annexing Canada or invading Canada and taking it for his own to make it the 51st state.
Quite a bit of talk about that. Yeah, that whole absorbing. And I always thought that was a bit weird, Chris, because you see, Canada is, and I think most experts on geography would agree with me on this, big.
Yeah.
It's a big place, right? So like a single state? Two senators? No. No, there's no way. You don't bring in Canada and it's 2 states. You bring in Canada, it's like 13 states.
I think it'd be scarier if they had that plan.
I mean, if they had that plan, I'm not certain I would be against it, because I feel like having 26 new senators, where probably 22 of them are just not pro-MAGA at all. I mean, that radically rewrites the political landscape of the United States at that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm anti-invading Canada. I don't know about you, Patrick. Sounds like you've been changing your tune. You hear it here. Exclusive. Heard here, folks.
I would annex the stars if I could.
for our eternal dear president.
Indeed.
Donald John. So basically, so you have all these overtures from the United States that are saying, let's take over Canada. Why? Because it's funny. And there's always these,
I'm not entirely certain that you're wrong when you say that. Like, you say it like it's a joke, but good God, it's kind of government by meme at this point. It
is government by meme.
Yeah.
Yeah. But basically, these overtures, people are taking them seriously. You want to take over Greenland, you want to take over Canada, which means effectively invading Denmark and invading Canada, 2 sovereign allied nations. And so the Canadians immediately are like, no, see, listen, we might be nice and friendly, but we also play hockey. And hockey isn't known as the most gentle of sports. I mean, it's funny. We make fun of Canadians as Americans because they walk around cowboy hats on. They wear cowboy hats too.
Oh, they absolutely do. They got boots.
Guns.
They got tons of guns. Yeah. And I think, honestly, half the reason why Americans make such fun of Canadians is that we teach history very poorly in America. Because I think if you're into sort of getting a sense of what Canada sort of does, check out its performance in World War I and World War II, where generally speaking, like especially World War I, it was very often Canadians doing incredibly dangerous and bloody work successfully, as opposed to some other countries that obviously suffered quite a bit. I don't know. Canada punches above its weight. That's all I'm saying. Don't sleep on the Canucks.
Well, of course not. And they, and because of the overtures that America, the government is now making to invading their country, Americans often forget or probably don't even know that the head of state of Canada is the head of state of the United Kingdom.
That is true.
Because there's a certain king, Charles Windsor.
Yeah.
So
Chucky 3, as we call him around the pond.
Wee Chucky 3. So basically, when you threaten Canada, you threaten the Commonwealth, you threaten the UK and the Commonwealth, because the king is the king of 16 countries. So when the king comes over to open up Parliament, which happens every year or every time it's needed, it's not he doesn't do it. It's the Governor General who's the quote unquote heads of state of Canada, the monarch's representative. So bringing over the king and flying him over, and it's a big deal. And basically, I think he said in the speech, because just like here, the speech is written for him. Canada is a free and will remain a free country. Yep. So that's a big FU and a big, we're putting our literal Canadian flag down.
Yeah,
letting you know that like, this isn't funny. Like, and this is because it's the same person that's going to effectively invite him. So the invitation to Buckingham Palace is coming from the same person telling him to stay the hell away from Canada.
That is 100% true. It is amazing to me just how clear, how impactful Trump has been on the politics of Canada. The very fact that the Liberals were able to get a majority again this time, the fact that they were able to form a government, is a testament to just how toxic Trump has been for the politics of MAGA outside of the United States.
Yes.
And of course, we have a few examples now of this. We have not just the example of Canada switching massively from a huge stonking lead for the Conservative Party to a Liberal majority.
Yeah.
We also have the stunning reversal in Romania, where the Trump-backed candidate lost by 10 points.
Yeah, that's right.
Just absolutely just just a huge loss on his part.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that the politics of Trumpism seemed to look much more inviting in other countries before Trump became president again. And ever since he's sort of gotten in and started talking about, casually invading and killing a bunch of people.
Just as one does.
Yeah, it's, you just go into Greenland, you shoot a bunch of people, you seize a bunch of territory. That's all fine, right? That's all perfectly normal behavior.
It's a nice day. It's a nice day,
amongst friends,
amongst allies.
Yeah, exactly. What's a little bit of murder?
Yeah. So
and argue over who killed who.
Yeah, I know. Like it's no reason to cry over it. Not anyway. So the whole point is that so we have that information and we have that like that thing that's happening. Other things that have been happening though. So not just royal things that have been happening in the United States. A singular court that most people have never heard of, including myself, has completely changed global economics. And
this is a really shockingly big story. It's one of those stories where when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, well, of course, obviously. And then slowly I came to realize, wait, hang on. The fact that the obvious ruling came down is actually a big deal.
Yeah.
And the implications of it are massive. But so we're talking around the subject. Let's talk through the subject.
Let's talk to the subject.
Oh, I like that. That's better.
Yes.
So, Chris, tell us about this court.
Oh, the United States Court of International Trade.
That's the one
that I don't know anything about, that I just learned about this week.
Chris, I think it's fair to say that 99% of everybody on this planet knew nothing about this court until just yesterday. And now about 5% of the planet has become an instant expert.
Yeah, I'm not one of them. I happen to be on the website right now, and it basically says
that's very helpful. That's better than me.
Yeah, the president, with the advice and consent of the Senate, appoints 9 judges who can constitute the United States Court of International Trade, which is established under Article 3 of the Constitution, which is wild. The judges are appointed for life, as are all judges of Article 3. They may be designated or assigned temporarily, so on and so forth. The chief judge is a statutory member of the Judicial Conference of the United States, so on and so forth. The jurisdiction of the court. Now, this is important. So let's expand real quick before we get into the detail. This court ruled against Trump and all of the tariffs that he was doing, and we'll get into why in a second. But this is why. The geographical jurisdiction of the United States Court of International Trade extends throughout the United States. The court can and does hear and decide cases which arise anywhere in the nation. The court also is authorized to hold hearings in foreign countries. Different types of courts and cases, so on and so forth. It goes on and goes on and goes on. The congressional intent for the nope, that part doesn't matter. I'm just reading through. Anyway, the whole point is that this court, which does exist, which is effectively like the Supreme Court for international trade issues, decided that Donald Trump's tariffs were illegal and unconstitutional because he doesn't have the constitutional right to unilaterally impose tariffs without an end. This is the important thing, is that first off, he declared an invasion when there wasn't an invasion. And they said, well, obviously there's not an invasion, so you don't have any right to do this. You can't just unilaterally declare an invasion. There's
an emergency because we have a trade deficit. It's an emergency. It's been happening for 50 years straight, but now it's an emergency.
Now it's an emergency. And also the powers that he uses are time limited. So he can't put on an unlimited tariff on these countries. Again, this is part of the MAGA thing, to get people to think that the president is the king of the country. What his will is what the country will do. Yeah. That is the real purpose of this tariff exercise, let's say. If the president can snap his fingers and change
and just sort of, well, and that's the thing. And I think it's worth unpacking that just a little bit, right? Because I think it's every president wants to expand the boundaries of presidential power because presidents like to do things.
And they don't have to crazy. And they don't have to talk to Congress to do it.
Well, that's the thing. If you can do something without having to go to Congress, if you can do something without having to go before a judge, you can just sort of do it on your own. That's power, right? And people don't become president because the shy, retiring sorts, who are afraid of exercising power. Yeah. In fact, that's kind of the idea behind having checks and balances in the first place. The whole point of having a clear separation between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial is that every side is going to be trying to expand its authority against the other two. So the other two are always going to be in a position to block the third. Right. And that's how you maintain the equilibrium. That was sort of the founder's idea. What's been really interesting here is that tariffs are explicitly given to Congress. The executive has simply nothing to do with it under the Constitution.
Right.
The only reason why Trump could make the argument that he could do this at all was that Congress had delegated some of its tariff-making authority to the executive under certain circumstances with certain rules.
Right, literally in extremis.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. In a situation where it's a national security emergency, the president is empowered to put, I think, emergency tariffs on specific goods, specific to national security for a set time limit. Yeah. And Trump was taking that to mean that he could just sort of do anything that he wanted whatsoever because laws are meaningless. And, he's the Red Queen, effectively, So, and I mean, he really is. It's like he read Alice in Wonderland and he sympathized with exactly the wrong people,
I don't think it's that he read Alice in Wonderland. I think that this is part of an ongoing, long-standing plan to basically focus either conventionally or legally power in the White House and without having to deal with Congress. I mean, Congress is obviously, the Republicans are mollified. They are completely, proper word, neutered. They've neutered themselves. They've done it to themselves. I mean, they could just they can reattach their various sex organs, but they've chosen to detach them, which is weird given how obsessed they are with who's got what. But they have definitely taken them off, thrown them in the bucket, and said, "I might get those some other day."
Exactly right. They're in a safekeeping. They're in a blind trust. They put the collective reproductive organs in a blind trust that's being run by the Trump family. So and those people who are around them. So when you see this court, who again, I doubt that the Trump administration would have even thought that court could do anything to them. I wonder about that.
I mean, think about exactly.
Well, they have lawyers. They do have lawyers. They haven't fired them all. So presumably, at some point, one of the lawyers said to them, this is all completely illegal, right? That this is going to get shot down at the earliest opportunity once it gets before the courts, because this is rampagingly illegal. And I think what made Trump so angry about this is not that he didn't think the court could do anything. He thought he had the court in his pocket.
I think he had the wrong court in his pocket. So I disagree with your analysis only in one space, in that the lawyers are smart enough to know that they're doing something illegal in that way. Like they've got Trump has a now very famous history of having totally shit lawyers. Alina Habba, right?
Yeah, no, that's
terrible.
He does have the world's worst lawyers. That is true.
Good lawyers.
But that's the thing. The lawyers for the U.S. government, they're not lawyers for the president. They're not lawyers for Donald Trump as an individual. They're lawyers for the government itself.
Oh, you're talking about like Justice Department lawyers, or
I'm
lawyers
talking about the Trade Department lawyers. I'm talking about the people who they don't run the government, but they're the ones who make the government run.
The civil servant lawyers.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So those guys, they're quite smart. They certainly know this law, even if they don't know all law. They definitely know this bit of law. So I think Donald Trump would have known, should have known, and was almost certainly told how this was going to end once it got before the judges. The thing is, in this panel that heard this, right? It was a unanimous decision, despite the fact that 2 of the 3 judges were appointed by Republicans.
Right.
One by Ronald Reagan and one by a certain Donald J. Trump.
in his first term.
Yes, which means that he is now very angry that he, put judges on into the court who are behaving like independent judges as opposed to being yes men.
Have you seen the post?
Yes, I was just building up to that. Donald Trump has declared Leonard Leo the head, until recently, of the Federalist Society, the conservative conspiracy to undermine Like the judiciary and the rule of law in the United States has declared him a, Chris, what was the word?
Oh, I don't remember the word. You tell me.
Oh, it was sleazebag.
Oh, he's a sleazebag.
He was a sleazebag, you see.
I wrote it. I read it early this morning, and all I was just sitting there as I was cackling.
It's hard not to cackle. It's hard not to give a cackle. Like this is like when two sports teams that you personally hate are playing each other. Who do you root for? You root for injuries. And that's basically the scenario we're in right now with this. Like,
it's the University of Florida playing the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, I get it.
Oh my God! Just yeah. Like,
but this is that tweet. I'm sorry, that truth, whatever they call it on his dime store Twitter, is it's like he has now announced the thing that they've never announced before. They basically said, the Federalist Society is designed to instigate the fascist state of America.
Yeah.
Like, that's the point of view. That's the only point of view. Your job is to agree with whatever I say, never turn me down. And when I say take over the country, through the judicial force, you just lay down and bend over and take it. And
you're supposed to be yes men. You're supposed to do what I say. I put you on there to rule in my favor, regardless of the facts and regardless of the law. See, he's very open about this.
Yeah, I mean, and that right there is an impeachable tweet.
Well, but everything he's done is impeachable.
I know.
Yeah, it's one of the real failures of the American system that they created the only mechanism for Congress to remove a president who is engaging in unconstitutional behavior, massive law breaking, unspeakable corruption, is to have 2/3 of the Senate convict him. Like, it's never going to happen because the Republican Party is a deeply corrupted institution at this point. A lot of them know this is crazy. A lot of them know this is dangerous. Yeah. Like they knew that after he tried to overthrow the government on January 6, 2021.
That's right.
But for political reasons, they decided that it was better just not to pull the trigger on that. It was just better not to bring down the hammer. It was better to ignore the clear direction of the Constitution, because they figured, well, Donald Trump's cooked anyway, so why take the hit?
No, and they also wanted to win. I mean, and other countries like Brazil, they have criminality clauses. So if they're found guilty of a crime in a court, then it leaves the realm of the Senate, and it goes into an actual courtroom. I mean, and of course the Brazilian Constitution was written in 1986, so you can see, like, a bunch of guys in 1789 or 1779, or whenever the Constitution was written. I think it was
1789 was that. That was 1789. When it was, exactly.
Yeah, and would say, the president's never ever not going to be one of us. For the rest of the time.
Right, exactly. Only the best people will be president. The Electoral College, you'll see to that, they said to themselves.
And we are the Electoral College, and we can filter out the people. And also, who can run? Bob Jones, the farmer, in Ohio can't run unless that farmer happens to own a massive estate. So, I mean, the Constitution does need to be, re-looked at. But there's another side to this I want to look at before we move on. And that's what it did to the markets. Now, before we recorded, Patrick was mentioning this. So you would think that a court getting rid of all these ridiculous tariffs would make the market feel a lot better, because when the tariffs were implemented, the market took a nosedive because they said, well, here comes a global recession. Not for nothing, the price of gold spiked. And I know a lot of people don't follow the price of gold. I do. And I mean, since kind of it became clear that Trump might be the winner, the price of gold has gone up by $400 or $500 or pounds. And we're talking about, it's already 2,500 pounds. I don't remember how much it is in dollars, but a year ago it was 1,800.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's not normal. What happened with the stock market?
Well, what's interesting, right, is that the pattern has been Donald Trump does something insanely stupid, markets tank. Donald Trump realizes, oh no, markets have tanked. This was a bad idea. And then he walks it back, and then markets go up again. And then Donald Trump is like, well, everything's back to normal. I can do my crazy shit. Then he does something insanely stupid and markets tank. And then he goes, oh no, so he walks back. This has actually led the finance industry, apparently, in the United States to come up with the fantastic phrase, taco
Taco. I love tacos.
Oh, I love tacos too. I love this taco in particular because taco is an acronym for Trump always chickens out.
Always chickens out, and he
Trump
always
chickens
makes
out.
and he makes it so much worse
Oh yeah.
than it needs to be. I mean, and this is, it's just example after example
Yeah.
after example. 145% tariffs. This time last month, China was under 145% tariffs, and the entire world, like, America's like, well, we're not going to have computers.
Yeah.
Every
Oh
2
well,
weeks.
I guess no more trade. I guess the port of LA, we could just close up shop. Who needs?
Shut down West Coast ports. Why do we need that? Make America great again.
Yep. But it's okay because, of course, the whole point is you'll shut off all trade with the rest of the world and have pure autarky, and we'll build all the factories in America, but then we'll get rid of all the tariffs, so none of that will happen at all. And that's all the art of the deal, Chris.
It's all the art of the deal. So
exactly.
When these tariffs, were announced, like, okay, did they undo the damage in the markets?
Well, okay, so when this ruling came down, markets did in fact go up, but they went up by like 1.5%. And as the economist Justin Wolfers, who's at University of Michigan, pointed out recently on Times Radio, this is not recovery to where the markets were before all of this ridiculousness started happening, which suggests that the markets don't think this is the end of the story. That even though the courts have ruled against Trump, even though the courts have ruled, and for the record, it's not all the tariffs that have now been crushed. It's just the Liberation Day tariffs, which are incredibly stupid, and there was no legal basis for it, and also it was unconstitutional. He could still impose tariffs under legal authority. He'd have to follow some procedures. It would have to be for limited times. It would have to be for, things actually involving national security. This hasn't removed any powers from the presidency that the presidency actually possessed.
Exactly.
But it did basically mean that the really big tariffs we've all been talking about and that have been threatening global stability, those are now officially illegal.
Yeah.
And I think the markets were onto something in their relatively muted reaction to this.
Well, he's appealed.
Well, he sure has. He has appealed to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals, it seems, is going to let the appeal be heard. And I say that because the Court of Appeals has already vacated the order by the trade court, basically, because the trade court said not only are all these tariffs absurd and not legal, you do not have the power to do it, therefore they never existed in the first place, therefore you have to get rid of the tariffs. You have to repeal them, basically.
Right.
The Trump administration has now got the Court of Appeal apparently to say, well, actually, we're going to keep those tariffs in place for now while this works its way through the courts.
Right.
Now, that's worrisome to me because you really should see a court engage in something like that only when, for the same reasons that the court would issue an injunction, which is that the person in question is likely to win on appeal. The balance of equities favors them because they're going to get hurt more than the other side will if you go in the other direction. Basically there's a list of things that a court needs to consider when determining whether or not to grant an injunction. And it would seem like for the Court of Appeal to do this, they have to be thinking one of two things. Either they're thinking, well, normally, of course, we wouldn't interfere with this ruling. Normally, of course, we wouldn't interfere with the statement that, you've got to walk back the tariffs since you had no legal right to put them in the first place. But it's the president, and we really don't want to cause trouble. And we really want to make sure it's very clear to everybody that we're acting above board.
Yeah.
In which case the court is thinking politically.
Yeah.
Rather than purely on the basis of law. And as someone who, I don't know, has one of those old-fashioned beliefs in things like the rule of law, I find that worrisome. I don't like that. I don't think courts should be taking that into consideration unless it's an absolute necessity. And it doesn't strike me as being one here. The alternative explanation is scarier, that the Court of Appeals actually thinks that the Trump administration has a case here. And this is really one of the situations where there is no other side to argue.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to say that the Constitution has no meaning and law has no meaning, and the president is completely unbounded to do whatever he wants. And I really hope that's not the case, that the Court of Appeals is thinking that.
Which means we need to look at who's on that particular Court of Appeals and, what version of the Federalist Society they came from. and who appointed them, because if it's a bunch of Democrat appointees, they probably wouldn't have appealed it. So there has to be at least one or two. Usually these appeals courts have three people on them, right? Three judges or something.
Yeah, you'll have like a panel of the members of appeal. And when that panel gives its ruling, you could appeal that to the full Court of Appeals. You could appeal that to the Supreme Court. I suspect this is headed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Much more sooner than later. And it's the Supreme Court will be very, very likely to take it up if there is any question of needing to overturn one of the lower courts on this. But if I am the Supreme Court, if I'm one of the, if I'm one of the conservatives on the Supreme Court, and I've spent so much of my time arguing that things like, the important questions doctrine, right? That Congress cannot delegate its authority to the executive for important questions that really absolutely matter. So if I've spent all my time doing that, it would be very weird for them to turn around and say, actually, Congress can totally, give away its tariff authority.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's my hope.
Yeah, but, so we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, more on this story as it develops.
Right. So, last bit for this part, we've gone a little bit longer than we were intending to, but we did talk about the king for a while.
Well, there you go. I mean, and you can't blame a man for discussing his sovereign, can you? Not my sovereign.
Not your sovereign, no.
Not my sovereign.
No. So, that's fair enough. Yes. Yeah. So, anyway. But speaking thereof, we talked about this a little bit last week about what the political situation here in the United Kingdom, which is becoming more and more like America every day. And of course, we need to talk about both the Labour Party and reform, specifically because Labour is now effectively treating reform as the main opposition party.
Yeah, and they kind of are at this point. Reform is the party that is farthest ahead in the polls currently.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party has really, really crashed. They appear to be entering something of a death spiral, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see long for Kimmy Badenoch, hang on. Oh, that's good. That please on card and come by.
Yeah.
I don't see long for Kimmy Badenoch as leader of the party. Robert Jenrick, her shadow justice secretary, and the person that she beat in the last competition to become leader of the Conservative Party. He's been running around Stratford Station here in London, running after people who don't pay the tube fare, and then just yelling at them on camera, basically trying to be a new version of Farage.
Oh, well, that is just prime ministerial material right there. That's exactly what your average Brit wants from the leader of their country, I think.
It's highly memeable. Memeable. I haven't watched it. I can watch it through a surrogate. I'm not going to watch his take on it because obviously that's what he wants. But yeah, they're going to need a Boris or something to bring him back into power, or at least even back into second place, because Nigel Farage he's got the look of, he doesn't even have the look of it. He's just a regular white dude who seems to be yelling at the right people, and that seems to be enough for people. There's a lot of, I want the establishment to change. I want to see a massive shift in politics. And we could be at that moment in British politics, but unfortunately, when that moment happens and it's a right-wing party, they tend to not stop after they've, booted or killed all the immigrants and minorities. Yeah.
Well, there's sort of a long history of extreme right-wing parties gaining power to really shake up the system and just, doing a hell of a lot more than that, basically.
Yeah, there's a huge history of that. So what has Labour been doing to counter this? Now, the Labour is the government that was entered in on change. They were supposed to take us away from the history that the Conservatives had left behind, and they were supposed to bring forward.
Fixing the Tory mess.
And
to be fair, the Tories had made quite the mess of things.
Huge mess.
Huge mess. Really, really slow economic growth, real problems of inflation. Liz Truss blew up the country's
destroyed the economy.
Bond markets. She made my mortgage payment go up by 50%. So, full disclosure, not a Truss fan.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. So here's the issue, though. I mean, two of the things they did was to cancel the winter fuel payment, which I think we talked about last week.
Yep, this was one of their big cost-saving things they were going to be doing. And I know that there's an argument to be made for it in the sense of like, if everyone gets the fuel payment, that means rich people get the fuel payment.
Yeah.
And why should rich people get the fuel payment? Because, you know, they're already rich. And it's just, I would say, the politics of it have not been to the Labor Party's favor.
Well, it's not what the Labor Party looks like. The Labor Party is not supposed to be the party of cuts.
No,
you know,
for God's sakes.
I mean, it's the Labor Party. You think that they're going to, stronger trade union laws and, make the rich pay more in taxes, go
Decrease
after capital gains.
Yeah. Increase public investment, like stop starving people, make sure people got healthcare, things like that. That's why you vote Labor.
And yet, in their first nearly year in power, what they have done and what they're known for are cutting benefits to the poorest people in society and screwing over the poor by there's a thing called the 2-child cap, which is a very right-wing concept, which is effectively you are only, if you are on benefits or what we would call welfare in America, if you have more than 2 kids, then you get a thing like a child payment benefit or child benefit payment. If you get more than that, first off, you can't get any more child benefit payments. And I think, and there's effectively a punishment and a penalty for having more than 2 kids. And it is the state effectively telling you, you're poor, you can only handle 2 kids, and we're not going to fund any more of your children. Which,
it's the kind of thing that makes perfect sense if you believe that women decide to give birth to human beings because maybe they could get a little bit of extra money from the government that doesn't cover the costs of that extra human being.
Yeah, in America, we called that welfare queens back in the 1980s.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Chris, that shit was racist as hell back then, too.
It was 100% racist. And this is just a classist thing here because classism is a much bigger thing in the UK than it is in America.
Yeah, but it's still based on the idea that, like, some women aren't really human beings. They don't act like human beings. They're just, they're just out there for money, and that's why they have kids. And the people who believe this very often are the same people who believe that we have a crisis because not enough women are having babies.
Yes, not enough of the white women are having babies. So the issue is that what Reform has done, Reform UK Limited, because of course Reform UK is a privately
not a political party.
It's a privately held company, and so they've gone on television this week and they've effectively said, we're going to reinstate all the stuff that Labor took away from you. Which on the face of it sounds amazing. So you vote for us, we're going to bring back this payment. We're going to cut the child benefit cap. We're going to make Britain great again. Whatever you want, we're going to do.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem with these parties, is because on the face of it, if you saw a headline saying Nigel Farage is going to bring back winter fuel payments for your nan, for your grandmother, and they're going to make sure that you can have as many kids as you want if you're on benefits, why wouldn't you vote for them?
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of amazing that the Labor Party seems to believe, under Keir Starmer, that the way to win at politics is to promise to govern from a center-left perspective and then get into power and immediately govern from the right. And when you have a strong challenge from the extreme right, to move even farther to the right. So you have Keir Starmer, I can't even believe I'm going to say this, but it's true, echoing the language of Enoch Powell in his Rivers of Blood speech that got him kicked out of the Tory party for being too racist. Like, Keir Starmer, for God's sakes, talking about a nation of strangers.
A nation of strangers, yeah.
Right, that just by being more anti-immigrants, that'll really seal the deal. That'll reclaim his popularity. And what is it that the extreme right party does in reaction to this in order to extend and maintain their popularity? They go forward with left-wing economic policies. The shit that the Labor Party is supposed to exist to do.
Yeah.
How do you explain to someone, the thing that you're doing is killing you, and the thing that the guys who are killing you are doing, that's the thing that would work, but you're explicitly not doing the stuff that would work in order to do the things that are killing. Like, good Lord. It's like a lung cancer patient who is just like, you know what? I need more cigars. A few more cigars, that'll do the trick.
No, you need more smoking, because when you smoke a cigar, you don't bring it in.
You're right, exactly.
I need more thick Marlboro Reds. That's what they're saying. I mean, and that's the big problem here with the Labor Party, is that I've said this many, many times and will continue to say it, they are playing to the markets. They're not playing to their own voters. They're leaving their own voters behind, and they think that they can grab these, right-wing voters who are being abandoned by the Conservative Party. But those right-wing voters who are being abandoned by the Conservative Party will likely run to the Liberal Democrats. They're not going to run to Labor, because
that's the thing.
Those people still see Labor as, the party of Jeremy Corbyn and Michael Foot. And, they're trying to socialize everything, and we won't be able to have a different color phone, which is a thing here. You can have any kind of phone as long as it's black. This entire, the entire first year of the Labor Party being in power has been, for me, it's not obviously as bad as the Conservative Party, but I think for them, it's been a total disaster.
It is, politically speaking, it has been a hell of a disaster. And I will never understand how the Labour Party has been in power for an entire year and has let the narrative congeal that says that while they're not actively making things worse like the Tories were, they are explicitly refusing to make anything better.
Yeah, well, that's just it.
Yeah, and finally, they seem to have woken up and realized, oh God, we're doing something really stupid here, because now they are talking about maybe going back to the full winter fuel allowance, and maybe ending the 2-child tax credit or a two-child limit. And it's monstrous political malpractice for this government to have spent so much of its time pissing off its voters, and totally misreading the political message, while at the same time not putting forward a strong vision to be able to mollify markets, to convince them, no, we know what we're doing. Here's how we're going to institute growth. Here's how we're going to get the country back on its feet. Here's how we're going to be able to pay our debts. And I mean, I think a lot of the blame really has to go for Rachel Reeves, because the Chancellor has decided that under no circumstances can they raise taxes on the wealthy, which means that, they're just sort of declaring that we could do nothing but cut, but also the cuts are killing us.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely insanity. It's absolute insanity. Yet we're going to see how it goes. I think the final point here is, if you want to make it as well, the problem here is that we don't see a strong alternative to reform yet, because it's not the Conservatives. And so they're going to need to have one in England. There is one in Scotland. This is not an advert for the SNP. This is just that the SNP are just a different kind of party up there. And Labour is running into an issue. If Labour hadn't done what they're doing, we'd be in trouble still. But we're not. We're not in the same way that we were before. We're still, we still have to work hard for the votes, and we have to work hard to win. There's a by-election coming up, and we have to make sure that that's working. But even their reform, apparently is, doing a lot better than people thought they'd be doing. So, I mean, it's a UK-wide party that seemingly, can do no wrong, even though their councillors are just consistently doing wrong things and have done them online. They have to resign. So, I mean, that's where we are with this particular subject. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back to you, there will be a little bit less noise behind me. So that's
true. Things may be very different indeed when we reconvene.
So we will see you then.